we'll have this discussion.
Discussion? What discussion?
This is a discussion.
Combustion.
Coming to you from Denver, Colorado. This is Discussion Combustion Podcast with your hosts, Kevin Batstone and Arthur Raw.
Welcome into another wonderful episode of DCPC. Honestly, man, I am super excited for this one. We got Landon in here tonight. This man creates worlds. This man creates art. This man creates lifestyles in the D&D community, and it's fantastic. We're excited to sit down and talk with him. But before we jump into the action, you already know that if you're trying to alleviate some pain and you don't want to use over-the-counter painkillers, then you're going to want to check out mountainmadecbd.com for crystal clear Mountain Made CBD products. And if you punch in promo code DCPC, you're going to save 20%.
Take advantage of it while you can, guys. Sexy September is going to rip by. You know, Mountain Made's going to be making some adjustments, so take care of it while you can. 20% off your entire order. You guys have heard it time and time again. The build, the boost, the recover. You know, you got CBD for your dogs. Take care of your furry friends. You got defense. You got combat. They have everything you need in the CBD category. It's a saturated market. We know that. But this truly is the clearest, the purest, the most affordable CBD you're ever going to get. They ship nationwide. Take advantage of it while you can. 20% off with that promo code DCPC, and that is hashtag Go Like Hell.
And go like hell, baby. And you know we are also brought to you by Wild Outdoor Adventures, and that's WOAMEET.com for less dreaming and more exploring.
Free and easy to use website, guys. The summertime, the fall is going to be coming quick. It's going to be coming and gone. It's going to be winter. Get outdoors while you can. Free and easy to use website. Sign up. Check out what's going on. Blogs. Connect with other people. Talk about some of the equipment you got going on. Check out their YouTube channel if you're a little bit leery about it. They document all these hikes that they do. A lot of fun stuff, man.
Great website.
It really is. I'd like to get one more hike in before the season is out. WOAMEET.com, and that is less dreaming and more exploring.
And we're super excited to be talking with Landon. Landon, we met you organically, actually, in the studio building.
Yeah, you certainly did. I work as a reception for my day job, or receptionist, and it's a match made in heaven.
Oh, yeah.
Excited to be here.
Organic guests are always my favorite, and you know, when I came up the elevator that day, Art's like, I think we just booked a guest for September. And this was back in either late July or early August. I can't remember which. Mm-hmm. But anytime that happens, it's fun. And then I remember, you know, going out to do something, I came back in, you told us a joke, and I was like, hey, man, aren't you coming on the podcast in like 6-7 weeks? We're like, yep, that's it. So here we are. That time's come and gone. Landon, super stoked to sit down and have a drink with you. Thanks for being here, bud.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, we're super excited. It was funny because when we both met you, you asked us a question each.
Do you want to hear a joke?
Yeah, do you want to hear a joke? But not only do you want to hear a joke, but do you want it to be dirty or clean?
Oh, the follow-up. Right.
Yeah, and then Kevin and I both picked dirty jokes. But the main thing about this is that you hit us with different jokes because you hit me first and then Kevin next. And I remember being like, well, what was the joke he told you? So you can't play with this dude. He has plenty up the sleeve. Mm-hmm. You know, you got plenty of that material, man.
Yeah.
And so you're jumping into the Discord world for art development for D&D, role-playing action. It's like a D&D. I've never done it. Tell me if I'm getting it right. So it's a turn-based game with dice, and it's basically a role-playing RPG, a turn-based role-playing RPG desktop / online type of game, right?
Yeah. So Dungeons & Dragons is it's a role-play event. It requires some math wherein the dice come in.
Okay.
And it's turn-based in combat. But outside of combat, you have more free-form interactions, much like the conversation we get to have here. There are points where the lull happens on one side and the other person starts adding more, or there's a lot of excitement going back and forth, and you have to find a way to mitigate that with plot. But it's not always behind the computer either. In today's COVID day and age, we're seeing a lot of people move into a position of needing to find a place to play, but not having a table to gather around. And so in this context, what we're seeing is a lot of people go online. Specifically, Discord is a great platform to use. They're not sponsoring me or anything, but I would love if they did.
They will eventually.
Maybe someday if I get popular enough, we'll see. The process of running game is about making space for those conversations to happen, much like what you guys do here.
Nice.
Outstanding. It's always great to create an environment where open conversation can take place. Mm-hmm. And we've all had to adapt and overcome during the COVID times.
Right.
You know, the gaming industry is no different, or the art industry, or the entertainment business. Everybody's had to make sacrifices along the way. So anything we can do to keep that ball moving and keep people, you know, keeping the traction, putting the rubber to the road.
Exactly.
That's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, and one of the most amazing things about the platforms that I'm working in is they give us a table to gather around when we don't have a table in person that we can group together with. A lot of my players, a lot of the people that participate in my events, even my audience members are from not just the U.S., but all around the world. And Discord gives us the ability to easily have a either voice or video call and hop in there to have that conversation and have that really powerful role play element to it for some combat or even just for some like socializing with my fake boyfriend. You know, you got options when it comes to Discord. And having that game on that platform allows for a lot more flexibility.
Nice.
Now, what would you say comparing to we always like to use COVID as a measurement of how things are going, right? But what have you seen in your tenure there as far as what it looked like before and now transferring more to a little bit of that? Has it grown? Has it stayed the same?
Wow, great question. I'm going to have to go a little bit further than pre-COVID because D&D goes back 20 plus years, maybe more. I'm not too good with first edition, but we're on 5th now. For those who are diehard Dungeons and Dragons fans, they'll know one of the most popular guidebooks for mechanics currently is 5th edition, which had its predecessor, which was not 4, actually, it was 3.5. But before that, you had 2nd edition or Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, and then before that, you had the original Dungeons & Dragons 1st edition, which was where some other mechanics for roleplay and combat in fantasy-type settings were given flesh and blood to be able to play in a system by Wizards of the Coast. So thank you guys for putting that together for us. And now we're in a position where, like during COVID, we've transitioned from, it's kids gathering around in their garages or basement grabbing a lemon with some toothpicks for a token beholder, which is a dangerous monster, or little bottle caps for the player figures. Whereas now, even with COVID or without COVID, we've progressed to a degree of advancement for role-playing in that system that allows us to have tools at our disposal that aren't necessarily physical. Whereas Dungeons & Dragons used to be a very tabletop system.
Tangible.
Yes, that's a great word to put it. Great way to put it. Tangible system where you gather together in person. The hardest part is always scheduling, finding a way to meet together. And once you meet together, you get that opportunity to have somebody run a story and these other participants get to play along with it in person. But now, because of COVID, a lot of those games are no longer an option. People aren't able to meet at a table, or they have to socially distance, or there's certain family members they're trying to protect. And so in order to keep that distance from each other, they still want to meet, and they still want to hang out, and they still want to play these games. Because the hardest part is scheduling, and if you can overcome scheduling, then we'll move mountains to make sure the game happens. And so now in the post-COVID age, what we're looking at is more advanced electronic tools as opposed to more creative physical outlets. Whereas people used to be building their home settings. You'd have like little castles that you'd spend hours and hours meticulously painting. And now you can go on a program like Incarnate, which is this program where you can design tabletop maps for a virtual tabletop on the fly, and they belong to you. And you can make this art that then you can show to your players, and they can have just as an involved experience as they would have had in person.
Nice. That's super cool. I mean, because as everything progresses, there's progression. Right. And so to see how people have, taken up to the challenge of doing this and creating this new way to, enthrall people in the experience, that's really cool. But it's not easy to just come on and start creating all this stuff. And that's something that you offer. That's a service you offer, which is actually helping people create these digital pieces, maps, or worlds to play on. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the services you have, kind of where people can see you there? And of course, we're going to dive into more conversations, get to know you better too, man.
Well, I mean, this is probably part of getting to know me. This is one of the most exciting portions of my life. Is I've actually started moving my art that I studied for years in college and then have dragged with me into my adulthood, and now I'm actually making money on it.
That's awesome.
Which has taken a very long time to do, but Incarnate's given me that ability because it allows me to own the content that I create with a program that isn't.
And what's Incarnate?
So Incarnate, it's map-making software.
Okay.
Where a bunch of artists from all over the world, they make stylistic content that you can drop on as like little stamps and drop them onto a map. Then you can paint certain elements on the background. You can add things as you go. And instead of having to, like, say, hand draw 50 trees, you take one tree, group of stamps, and then you can just drop that onto a map as many times as you like, and you don't have to go individually and draw every single tree. You can just expect that the program will handle I don't know, 1,000, 2,000, 10,000 trees, no problem.
Nice.
And it runs in a browser. It's free to use. It's pretty great. But that program allows me to create content for people that don't have artistic ability, people that don't have an eye for the way they want their world to tie together. And so most of my services, as you mentioned, my art career has been based on working with writers who really want a world map for their reality, but they just don't have the ability to put that together in a visual format.
So just for example, I'm on Reddit. A lot of people know this, but there's a whole subreddit that's world building. Mm-hmm. And there's always bitchin' maps on there. Great
platform.
So
to share stuff,
some of those maps, would that kind of be something that could be imported into a D&D thing, or those too big a map? What kind of size of map is going into this D&D world? Is it a continent? Is it, a state? Is it dependent on how long you want the round to go?
Well, the round is usually in combat, so we'll see a lot of battle maps that are typically much smaller. Okay. Unless you deal with high-level characters that have 6 minions behind them, and they're controlling all of these minions as well as their own character, you might have a much larger map.
Okay.
But in small skirmishes, between for Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition from levels 1 to 5, you're looking at interactions between players that are probably 200 to 500 feet square for everything you would need for that entire game of session, that day of travel or that day of combat. So it depends. But you also, using this program, have different styles to approach it with. So you can use regional stamps, like these big isometric perspectives on buildings and these trees that have shadow patterns through them and are upright, as opposed to just a top-down view, which is a battle map. More for that turn-based role-play combat scenario, it's top-down. But if you want to describe how far X continent is from Y continent and what their trade relationship is, you probably want to start making a regional map. And then it's less about where the players are on that board and more about the relationship between the elements that you create as the dungeon master or the storyteller or the narrator.
So it could be played in all those different ways.
Yeah.
It could be played on this, we're fighting for a city, or the plot is about this city, or it could be about a whole continent.
Right. And Wizards of the Coast has published a series of texts, as well as many other platforms for role-playing that aren't just Wizards of the Coast for Dungeons & Dragons. Powered by the Apocalypse is also a great platform for running game because they offer a tool set for the mathematics of the game that are more narrative and less mathematical. So in D&D, I would roll to attack, and I have to roll a 20-sided die, and I add my bonuses, and I say, yes, well, it beat your attack modifier or your defense stat, so I definitely hit you, and then I'll deal this amount of damage. Whereas in Powered by the Apocalypse games, your abilities are based on success or failure, and your application of that ability is either you're going to it's conceptual, so you're going toe to toe, or you're hitting it with all you've got, or you're trying to pierce their veil, or you're trying to comfort and support them. It's what you're trying to do is more contextual and more thematic and more story based than combat based.
And what's the time frame look like when it comes to developing a new scenario, a new map? Obviously, I'm sure there's a lot of factors that play into this: the size, the dynamics behind it. What is the average time frame when it's okay, here's what we're looking at. This is what I'm eyeballing. How does all that come together?
Really hard question to answer, just because of the as you mentioned, the variety of content that you have to be able to build, to be able to role play in, to be able to interact with. It's really complicated in terms of time. Mm-hmm. A world map that I would create for a writer would take me anywhere between 2 and 8 hours, and then I would be done. A campaign that I'm running for 5 to 6 players would take each session bi-weekly 4 hours with a 15-minute break in the middle. Whereas you can also do a one-shot, which is just a one-time role-play session where you just all get together, you make characters that night, and you say, we're going to let this hit the pavement, we're going to have some fun with it, and then at the end of it, it'll never come back. And that might just be a 1-hour session. There's a guy, I can't remember his name, he made a campaign called Honey Heist. I wish I knew your name so I could cite you, but I don't. It's a one-page one-shot. Has no other rules except for the one 8.5 by 11 piece of paper that the whole rule set goes on. That's the story, that's the character build, that's everything. Very, very easy campaign to play. And he's published a whole bunch of them. They only take 45 minutes, an hour. You can make them 2 hours if you want, but it can be much less.
So I've never played Dungeons and Dragons. I've heard all about it, and I'm learning a lot right now. So for anybody who is out there that hasn't played, is curious about it, maybe wants to make something like this, what are like the key elements that have to go in to each session? Like, because there has to be rules, and I know you said like it's on version 5 now.
Yeah.
So like, what has to be in there in order to, like, to kind of get a brief synopsis of what we're looking at?
If I were to say, hey, come to my game, we're going to roll a character for you as soon as you arrive, the best prep work that I would ask you to do would be, what are you excited about role-playing? Mm-hmm. And then I would have you answer just a few questions like, what gives your life purpose? What do you love? What do you hate? What would you always do? What would you never do? These elements shape the character and make it really easy to get an idea for what you want to do with the other players and how you want to interact at the table. Because ultimately, if you're brand new at D&D, you've never done D&D before, they have a couple of beginner adventures that dungeon masters or even new dungeon masters that have never really done this before can just pick up and roll with. Powered by the Apocalypse does the same thing, where they give you a set of tools and a set of pre-built characters that you can just say, I want to play the barbarian. And you pick that guy up and you say, I'm going to swing my great axe. And the DM, the dungeon master, will help you sort out how that works and what that looks like. Whereas if I have a seasoned player, then it's more about me doing a ton of homework about like their background and their story and what goes into what makes them a person and how I can further engage that person to enjoy their experience more.
Okay, there's just so much variety here.
So much.
What was your favorite character that you've seen that somebody came up with?
Oh, man. There was a legend of some sort of a devil imp creature that I ran into a while back that could miniaturize himself down to the size of a pixie and then re-expand himself into the size of a person at will.
Okay.
A
devil imp creature.
Devil imp creature. I'm not sure exactly. It was some sort of from the 9 hells in those dimensions somewhere.
Okay. So blackness in the heart, no shadow.
A lot of horniness going on. Probably.
That's everywhere. But
of course. Yeah, D&D's full of horniness. But interesting character. His token move was to run up to a guard as a person, turn into an imp, jump into his mouth, and then turn back into a person.
Okay.
And obviously this would do some damage to a person as you expand into a full-size person. That was a pretty interesting concept to run into. But in terms of character arc, I have much more fun with playing characters than I do with watching my... Because I've done dungeon mastering long enough to realize that everyone has a story to tell, and everyone has something to work through. And one of the most beautiful parts about Dungeons & Dragons is that often when a player comes to the table, they want to live a fantasy that they haven't been able to live in real life. Okay. And I want to give them the ability to do that. So I get really excited to see them role-play that situation. But I'm not as interested in, wow, I haven't seen that before. It's more, how can we make this special for you? In terms of playing characters, I'm much more interested in my own.
So what is your character then?
I had a couple.
What do you go with?
I had a couple.
What are like your hot two?
My hot two are probably my southern gentleman, who has a voice way down here. He's a great guy, and I really enjoy that guy.
And then I also have this little bit of a brat. He's a satyr creature, and he's got this kind of an Irish accent, which kind of lollygags into North Dakota and Minnesota after a while because I can't keep them separated. So that character, a couple of characters, a lot of voice acting, a lot of fun with like playing around with mic quality, and the most enjoyable that I get when I'm role-playing a character is taking something about myself that I want to take a closer look at and finding a way to make it interact with a world that is completely outside my imagination. It's bigger than the box that I've been able to build around myself, and see what I can learn about those elements about my life that I haven't been able to interact with in a reality format as much as I have the ability to interact with in a fantasy format.
That's so cool, man. I like it. You know, diving into those characters that you just demonstrated for us, that gets me excited. Because I'll tell you this, man, after sitting next to this guy for far too long, one of the worst accent impressions I've ever heard. I'm not saying I'm a prize. I'm not.
It's bad, okay? If I'm trying to do
Well,
the
here's
accent,
the thing.
it's bad.
Here's the thing:
we
is
get a
any
sample?
accent. If you're like, can you do a Southern accent? Can you do an Australian accent, a British accent, a New Zealand accent? Can you any accent that you ask them to do? It's always going to be the same result. And I love you, Art.
Oh,
You
yeah.
know I do.
But if I'm just, no one's asking anything, I can come up with a good accent by myself, but only for that sentence.
Well, see, but you talk
Sure.
to a lot of truckers, right? So I think that you have enough, experience down the field that I want to hear a good Southern accent, and I think Landon's going to be a good judge of this.
I can help with that. I come from the suddenly south of the actually East Coast, which is what I call North Carolina.
Which
because
has a
it's-
great accent. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm a huge NASCAR guy. So
Oh, yeah.
NASCAR
They
is
love NASCAR
headquartered,
out there.
Charlotte, North Carolina. That's NASCAR all day long.
You're
all day
really
strong.
putting me on the spot right now. I'm kind of getting anxious.
Dude, you can do it though. I think.
Okay, wait. You're really putting me on the spot right now. I'm getting kind of anxious.
Oh, is that the sentence?
Was that Southern? I'm never good at it. I'm never good at it.
There's some key points you got to hit there, right? I mean, you spent some time down in NC. You kind of the South. There's a certain way like that they draw out vowels. I feel like,
I don't even notice it anymore. I just kind of dislocate half the jaw and just slide right on into it, and suddenly I've got this whole thing going, and I don't even really know where it's going.
that's
It works. I've tried to outgrow it because it tends to give people a very particular impression when you first meet them.
Sure.
And it's very easy to allow those assumptions to shape the way that person sees you as soon as they listen to your voice in that format. And so I've gotten rid of it over time.
it is kind of interesting how we immediately analyze an individual on their accent. I was mentioning to you before we went on air. I'm from New England. So you probably don't hear the New England accent, but I can immediately turn it on. We're drinking a little whiskey, we're gonna have a couple beers, we're gonna kick back and have a wicked good time. That's what we do. We fucking potty hide. We like to have a good time. So it's like it's funny how accents really people are like, oh, you're New York, you're from here, you're from there, and it immediately builds. I don't know if judgment's the right word, but you kind of have a picture of, okay, this person's from the South, so I think this. This person's from New England, so I think this. This person's from Colorado, so I think this. The thing about Colorado is the accent out here, what is it? Because it's such a melting pot.
Yeah.
So I'm from here, and I would say that it's from the people that you hung out with the most.
Oh.
So I've been told that I probably have a more East Coast accent than any other accent.
More so, yeah.
Or maybe Cajun-ish, but those can be intermixed. so I mean, because I hung out with a lot of people from New York and
New
and
England.
a lot of people from,
And New Orleans,
and
yeah.
New Orleans. So Colorado, we don't have an accent. We just
I don't know, but
we
that's
just
true.
get other people's accents. It's just, I mean, it's like a, you start with like an ice cream. All right, Colorado's going to be your vanilla ice cream as far as accents go. And then every single person that jumps in the mix is an extra sprinkle, or maybe a chocolate chip up in it. But that's how Colorado accents work.
But if Colorado accents are vanilla, right? So if someone from Alabama or the South, because there's a huge Southern draw there, do they look at the Colorado accent as a Colorado accent, or is it just because you got to look at it from that perspective?
Well,
They're not used to hearing
absolutely.
the pronunciations. Because what I've
Yeah.
noticed about Coloradans, especially when it comes to like Coors, is
Coors.
you guys really draw those O's.
Coors.
Coors, Banquet,
Colorado.
Coors Light.
Colorado.
That's what I've heard.
Coors.
That's my observation. What's your thoughts on this, Landon?
Not many. I've moved too many places, and it all blends together. I told you guys out of the studio, I'm a military brat.
Yeah.
So grew up in the Marines, the Navy, all over the place, and so I'm constantly bombarded with a new sense of normal every time I move somewhere. And so the concept of what does it gravitate to, and what is it normally? And I say, well, I don't know. I've seen too many normals to know what normal looks like anymore. Because it was UK, and then it was East Coast, and it was Midwest, now it's further west, and it's hard to say. I don't know if I can tell you. I'm not a professional.
And I feel like you probably have more credibility than we do, being that you've lived in so many places to analyze some of these different accents, especially in the UK, which is one of my favorite places that I've never been to. I love their humor. I love that they love to drink. It fits in with my lifestyle, and I just love it. I love the accent. I think everything about it's great. And being from New England, we kind of stole their accent a little bit and kind of made it our own. But what do you think?
I don't know. I think an accent is based on what you're trying to convey. I try to convey a level-headedness consistency because I need people to be able to depend on me and take my word as doctrine. If I'm in the country and I'm in headed back to North Carolina, the accent that I'm thinking more about is I want you to make you feel comfortable. I want to make you feel like there's just the right amount of sweetener in your tea. And I need you to know that I know how much sweetener you want in your tea with just by speaking to you. That comes out. Whereas if I'm doing a British accent, which I can't do, so I'm not going to defile your mics with that. The British accent is about pose and composure. Mostly, I'd say composure. Probably. It's that's why newscasters all over the world they'll that one has a British accent, or that one can do a British accent, so we'll put them on the news because people trust a British accent more than they trust somebody who knows exactly how much sweetener should be in your tea.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's something to think about though, right there, because
Accent trust.
well, but I mean. That's a good point. That just clicked with me, because when I hear the Southern, I mean, NASCAR, grew up in it, so I'm used to Dale Earnhardt Jr., love him, love hearing that Southern accent, commentate my racing. But when I listen to a documentary, and I love Top Gear, and I love the Grand Tour, so Jeremy Clarkson, I love those UK guys. I love that UK accent. It makes for the best narrations of documentaries I've seen.
Yeah,
it just does. There's just something about it.
David Attenborough is
That's the name I was going to say.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the name I was going to say.
He's the trademark, and it's a British accent that'll carry you through.
That's
because people trust it and they considered it educational.
I mean, it is because BBC's been doing all the stuff
Since forever.
for a long time.
Well, there's just something about it. It comes off as well educated, direct, decisive, to the point, knowing the facts, being confident in the delivery. I think that's where the UK accent really captures all that. It's not like, I don't know what I'm talking about. And sometimes that's where the American accents can get a little bit stereotyped or even judged, like, oh, you're from the South, you sound like a dumb redneck. That becomes like a negative opinion of an accent, whereas the UK, it's like, okay, this person sounds educated, they have a good delivery. It's just interesting how we kind of analyze it that way.
It really
It
is.
is.
Yeah.
The art behind an accent. And
Is that the title of your book?
it would be a good one. But for somebody that's well versed and not like myself, that is able to pull accents out and hold them through a conversation and actually like have that as their demeanor. If you're in sales and you're just, none of your customers know who you are, but you just play these different roles to tailor to those customers,
Right.
and you go in there with the art of the accent, you can probably flip the game.
You really do. No, I, as a receptionist, completely agree with that. When I have my nursing home people call in and they say, I need help with I need an assistant, and they're not here yet. And I say, absolutely, we can help with that. I adopt a very soft tone. We focus on making sure they're comfortable and reassured that we'll take care of all of their issues. Whereas IT support, you want someone with a thick, strong American accent, because as soon as you see anything else, you're like apprehensive about the quality of service that you're about to receive, because so many IT jobs have been moved over because of prices and how cost effective they are to other countries. So if you hear an American accent as soon as you hop onto an IT phone, that really helps people out. Whereas if you're doing construction, you want to be gruff with people. So if I'm doing anything for one of my companies, it's more associated with materials and product supply and like a warehouse type mentality, then I'll kind of adopt something that's a little bit more rough. I'll truncate my sentences, use small words, and focus on mostly just the details of what's important for the sale. We don't need any more. We don't need.
Do you go this that
I go
far
this
with it?
on the phone. Like I have to.
That's dedication.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, because then like in that conversation,
I'm
you're,
in control.
You're dedicated to that.
I'm in control of the
point.
conversation at that point. Yeah, it's beautiful because they trust the person on the receiving end so much more when it's a conversation they expect to have. If it's a conversation they don't expect to have, we get all sorts of unknowns and unknowns, and it gets confusing for people. So yeah, frame your conversation with your accent, and you'll have a much.
So have you ever done the thing where it's like,
have a much.
all right, let me get my manager really quick, and then you have a conversation with yourself in two different types of voices?
No, I know people that can do that. That's actually way beyond my skill set. Dungeon masters that I know will do a couple of accents. We've got this one guy in one of my Discords he's delightful. He'll pop in occasionally, and he'll do like 3 or 4 accents back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. He'll have a good time. And we won't realize until like 30 seconds, maybe 2 minutes later, that it's not 2 people having a conversation. It's just one guy talking to himself in 2 different accents. And
That's
it's so
hilarious.
convincing. So convincing.
He probably loves that.
He probably does.
It's a strong commitment.
It is. It really is.
If you're going in with that, it's like, okay, we're going all in. and I'm going to play both characters until I'm blue in the face. We're going to ride the wheel until the wheels fall off.
Yeah.
I don't know if I could do 2 different characters at once. I'm not sure. I've never really experimented with it.
I could probably do my 2 main characters, but I can't imagine those 2 characters ever wanting to have a conversation with each other.
But that could make for great entertainment.
Oh, really could. Yeah, absolutely.
Walking into a bar and seeing this small boy with the fawn furry legs and hooved feet. What the hell are you doing?
Well, it's not really my fault that I walked in here. You're the one who just walked into a bar without actually reading it. It says satyrs only ahead of the door front. It's not my fault. And that's about as far as I get. It's just one back and forth, and then I'm suddenly lost and not sure, okay, well, how should I handle that? So when I'm doing dungeon mastering, when I'm running a game, when I'm running a session, I typically try to push my characters to role play, so they do all my character voices. And then I'll occasionally come in with a non-player character or a background character and punctuate things. But, yeah.
So I feel like you're partially taking the voice from the Persian god of the movie 300.
Oh my God.
Very omnipotent.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well,
Once you open your throat deeply, you can speak with such poise that people believe all the things to be canon and doctrine.
whereas, if you have a high pitch and you're excitable, then people go, wait, I don't think this guy actually knows what he's talking about. I think he's just really intelligent and has no idea how to connect with society. And that's what happens.
It's amazing. There's a psychology behind that
It
probably
really is.
still we need to do some more R&D on, because it's
Probably.
like you mentioned, you hit a lot of good points there as far as how people analyze somebody that they coming out of the gate, what they sound like, how they're presenting themselves. They already immediately have an opinion and how they're going to relate to that individual. We've probably all been victim of that or guilty of doing so when it comes to talking to somebody. Just because I'm from New England, when I hear someone with a New England accent, I'm not just like, oh yeah, I'm going to hit it off with this guy. But customer service, if I'm trying to get some IT issues handled, and I feel like this guy's a trustworthy, or gal is a trustworthy individual, and I can understand him, and they're direct, decisive to the point. Sure, I'm gonna feel that connection immediately.
Immediately.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the most amazing things when I worked in tech support was getting onto a phone with someone and just immediately hearing after I said, my bit, which I won't do on camera because then I'm endorsing a previous job, but they say, okay, now I can actually get to work on this. Because they've spent so long with a language barrier, having such a hard time, and there isn't really a technology that live translates people yet over the internet. It's all those technologies are still limited to in-person conversations where you have a little dongle and you hold it in front of your face and you talk to it and you turn it and it speaks their language. Live translation over electronic formats doesn't exist yet. I hope it will someday. That would make us all wiser as people, but we're not there yet. So instead, people get into a conversation with an IT person and they have an expectation every time that phone rings. And then when somebody comes online and says, thank you for calling X support, how can I help you? Suddenly all of that tension gets released just because of the accent.
It's true.
It's amazing.
I've done a lot of telesales too, and I've experienced that exact same interaction where people, they have this sigh of relief that they're talking to somebody from their own country.
Right.
And it's just wild that it has to tie into being raised, being conditioned to what you're comfortable with, which happens to everybody.
Yeah.
But then also within that, as you're being raised and you're comfortable within your box, how much did you learn about all the other boxes of the world?
Right.
All the other different, and so, because I feel like in all the time, because I've done a lot of sales, telecommunication or car sales, and you're dealing with a lot of accents, you're dealing with a lot of different demeanors, but I feel like you can still accomplish everything, no matter how subconsciously comfortable you are with a different accent or not. That person, if you just take the time to talk to them, you can find out the exact needs and wants. You can find out what their problem is, and you can solve it for them, regardless of the language barrier. So I completely agree with what we're talking about, but I'm kind of playing devil's advocate too, because just because a certain type of dialect makes you feel comfortable and you would prefer to hear that, doesn't mean that you can't accomplish the same thing with somebody. But it's just having that open-mindedness to have the
Yeah,
conversation.
it requires a flexibility, which many people in our culture are slowly losing as we calcify and get older and realize, well, this is how I'm going to be for the rest of my life. It's like, okay, sure, but like maybe you are an old dog and maybe you can learn a new trick. Maybe we can defy that concept and think about it in a different way. And I know you're
100%.
resistant and I know you're frustrated, but let's find a way to work together, because ultimately the computer still has to get fixed one way or another. And if we're not working together, then yeah, that's all I have to say.
Yeah,
if we're not working together,
if you're not willing to put some of your own personal opinions to the side to accomplish business, because that's the thing. When you go into the business realm, that's a whole nother realm than I personally feel like. No, this is business now. So if you want to handle business, then you got to handle business even if it makes you feel uncomfortable. And you got to find a way to make yourself comfortable through that business.
You keep using the word business, and I'm not sure, because I think functionally, business is about people, and when you get into the people business, or even just like working with your constituent, your peer, or whatever, yes, a certain level of flexibility has to be achieved.
Yeah.
But also a certain level of recognition about where that inflexibility just is and just has to be. Like, for example, if I'm trying to talk to even somebody in my own country, somebody in my own language, I am not going to ask them to open command prompt and run CMD or run ipconfig, because those are nonsense words to the average person. Completely nonsense words. But to a technician or anybody who's like born, I don't know, past like 2015, they will probably know, like, oh, well, 2015, that would probably make that person like 6 years old. Hang on.
That's an educated
That's an
person.
educated 6-year-old.
No, but a lot of
let me back
6-year-olds
up.
probably know more than their
they
grandmas
grew
do.
up with like
Yeah, so they're conditioned.
Yeah, and so it's about the people.
Mm-hmm.
It's about trying to find commonality between people, and trying to find a way to make sure that you're recognizing where someone is, so you can meet them where you are, and then accomplish incredible things together, which is possible. Dungeons & Dragons, IT work, business world, whatever, it's possible. But it takes some reflection and some consideration.
For sure. So one thing that I've always, the consideration part that you're talking about is, if I'm talking to somebody from India, or if I'm talking to somebody from the Eastern European front, and you can hear their accent and they're speaking in English, that's obviously a second language for them. Mm-hmm. So like,
which is really impressive.
Yeah, to sit down, pick up a whole nother language. Mm-hmm. I don't know 2 languages. So anybody who's bilingual, trilingual, quadlingual,
polyglot after 4. I
oh,
think
is that what it is?
Yeah, it's called a polyglot.
Yeah, if you're a polyglot, then you know a lot more and have a lot more culture than I do. And so for anybody that is dealing with that like level of I'm impatient with this person because I can hear their accent, they have broken English.
I'm expecting to misunderstand them,
Yeah,
so
like-
I will.
yeah, like-
You will misunderstand
Yeah.
someone if you expect to.
Yeah. Like, why don't you take that moment just to be like, this person is really trying to communicate with me in my native tongue, which is not theirs.
Yeah, they're stepping out. They're already outside their comfort zone.
Exactly.
You're meeting them
Yeah.
where they have come to meet you already. And it's important to remember that when you're getting into any kind of a conversation, really.
Yeah. I mean, just the whole conversation of conversation and dialect and inflection and accent and
Discussion
tone.
combustion, it's all what we're all about.
I know. Yeah, we're combusting on that right now. It's really interesting. It's interesting. We've never dived into this.
Well, I mean, and it really just kind of comes back to, like we talked about the fountains. When whether it's a phone call, a Zoom meeting, you now have a barrier that's there. Because I have a hard time hearing even sometimes Arthur over a phone call, right? So reading someone's body language, the way that they're presenting the information to you, live action, is always going to be the best form of communication. But we live in a world now where a lot of that is limited. So Zoom meetings, a lot of major decisions are made over Zoom meetings. Customer service calls over the phone, whether that's an accent we're familiar with or a foreign accent, there's still that barrier there, and that's just a challenge that has been put in place even before the COVID times, but now more than ever. So I think taking all that in consideration, I'm in the liquor business, so I deal with a lot of different, mom and pop business owners, and then obviously in the podcast business, doing Zoom meetings. All that combined, you just kind of take it all at face value, figure out what works, figure out what doesn't work, different forms of communication. And that's what I find the most interesting in the time that we're at right now in 2021 is, customer service, the expectations that people have, I think are unreasonable. And I think that some of the customer service that is given is unreasonable. But that's all contingent on the company, on the situation that you're in, and what's going on around you.
It really is. Yeah. Working as a receptionist, I can echo that 100%. And having worked for other coffee companies, which I won't say by name, it's tough when you're pushed to a certain speed and there isn't really time for reflection, where you get burned out.
Sure.
It can be really tough to transition to a place of taking stock of everything that's worthwhile out of every conversation when you're bombarded with hundreds of conversations a day.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's tough. It's really tough.
It is. And you kind of got to roll with the punches sometimes because, you get conditioned to deal with angry people, all of it. I mean, you see all of it out there, especially in the customer service side.
Yeah. And they call it either a thick skin or learning how to let things roll off your back. There's a couple different mental strategies for the way that you can handle it. But ultimately, I think it comes down to treating the other people like they're actually people.
Exactly.
And not expecting them to be robots.
Yeah. I think that's the best approach, honestly. I totally agree with that. It's just talking to this person like they're a person. Mm-hmm. You're not just a customer. You're not just another prospect. You're an individual.
You're a person.
And that's something we've lost touch with, I feel like.
So when people are out there and they're all frustrated about how their day is going and they just have this urge to start projecting on people.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And so somebody makes a small mistake checking them out. Sorry, I made this little mistake. They want to be like, man, you're so stupid for making that mistake.
Take me right to the manager.
Yeah, but those people are the most pretentious, self-absorbed, non-past problem dealing with, irritable, late. I want to go on this ass motherfucker type of person.
We can blow off steam about talking about these ass hats all the time.
Yeah.
I would love to, but in the spirit of productivity, they say no man's an island. I've met a couple fucking islands in my time who just refuse to let anybody else come in without a massive tax on the ship that's coming in and out, and that tax hurts, man. I've been at the checkout before. I've dealt with somebody who has absolutely no regard for me as a human being. That hurts. It hurts a lot, and I'm sure their day will never be affected by any of these conversations we're having because, once again, they're an island. Yeah. They refuse to take feedback. They refuse to take thoughtfulness. They refuse to take consideration. And those are the kind of people you got to let roll off your back.
I know. Just let it roll, man.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been that person at sometimes, where I'm having a day and, I might have just been
I've been there too. Absolutely.
Slightly rude to that person. And I feel bad when I'm in those moments, but, I try to reflect on it at least,
Good.
And be like, I'm really pissed about this, but does that person deserve this energy? And that's the thing though, is I'm consciously trying to be aware of that.
That's very cool of you.
I'm trying, and without the conscious awareness and actually trying, then it's easy to be an asshole in public.
It is.
But if you really try to just we were talking about this outside. You said, don't take things personally.
Of course.
And that's a huge helpful piece of advice that is cliche, but is super important, because the second you start taking everything personally, that's the second that everything else is controlling your life other than your own ability to move through it. Yeah. Because you're taking things personally. People are projecting their shitty day on you. You take it personally. Now that ruins your day. Opposed to if you're actually just being true to yourself, then you're never going to take anything personally if you got both your feet planted.
Right. And I think I would love to shift the paradigm from the words taking things personally to making things a principle, because usually it's not about personality. It's not about me. When somebody comes to the register and I don't know, what's a good example? I don't think I have a good example right now. I'm a white dude, so I get pissed off very, very infrequently compared to most people. But taking things personally versus taking things by principle, because I've stood up for things. I've said, no, I have to put my foot down and believe in this and prove that it's the right way. And there's a time and a place for that. Definitely. 100% agree. Is it the time and the place for that for in the drive-thru? You don't really have any power or the paycheck or the authority to like do anything with that. And that's a tragedy in our country that we have like no real power as workers currently in the food industry, but that's another thing. Often you run into somebody who's just flat out oversaturated and undercaffeinated. And when you run into that person, the best thing to do is just to, meet them where they're at, find a way to meet the service that they're asking for, and push them along so they can get to a better day somewhere. Yeah. It might not be with you, but it'll be eventually. And you don't have to stand on the principle of, you have to treat me like a person right now. I mean, you should, but you're not gonna. Not everybody will. And you just got to be okay with that. Sometimes it's not time. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's not the time for principle.
I mean, I always just like to think everybody has a bad day. I have plenty.
Yeah, of course.
And I usually like to be an optimist, like a person that is like intentionally being positive. And for example, in my apartments that I live in, I got an elevator. I'm on top floor, so elevator, you're always going to run into people. And there's this like super fit looking dude. Like he looked like he, worked out and like took care of himself. And he was waiting for the elevator when I walked up, and I could just tell his energy was like, dude, I hope this guy doesn't fucking talk to me. And like I was like, hey man, how
how's your day?
Day's going good. Just little, I'm having a good day, so right. I'm trying to just share the sunshine.
Let that rub off on somebody.
Yeah, we're sharing the sunshine. Yeah. And he didn't want to have it, and like I like tried to talk to, but sometimes you just gotta let that. Yeah. He could be dealing with some major shit. Yeah. And just doesn't want to deal with anybody, because I've been there, and so that's the thing, like. Because there's so many varieties of personality types, and everybody's perspective is their own reality. So you're living in this paradigm of like all these different realities colliding in society. And so to just approach it with an open mentality to like, hey, like I'm doing good, that I know a lot of people aren't. Like, and that way you're just, the whole taking things personally or what you're...
On principle, yeah.
Yeah, what's your principle, like... maybe your principle is like, people can have a bad day and I'm going to have a great day. It doesn't matter what they have.
Sure, yeah.
I don't know. It's interesting to kind of dive into all that and kind of just the psychology behind.
Yeah, I really agree. It's important to, as I say, meet people where you're at and figure out where they are so you know how many steps you have to take to get to them. Don't think I put it that way, but as a good expansion. Mm-hmm. It's kind of the same thing that I run into when I'm managing campaigns. When I'm focusing on having a good interaction with a player or having a fun role play situation between two characters, the notes that I take are not about their weapons. It's not about their armor. It's not about their ability, strengths, weaknesses. It's about their family. It's about their personality. Like I have my notes here from my next campaign that I'm going to be running. And I have my list of my characters' names so I can keep things sorted. And the only thing I really have down here is next to one player I have written sword. Next to another player I have body of a friend was found. Another player says just boyfriend. Like there's just simple stuff that's about things that they care about, things that are important to them, that are their priority. And I want to try to meet them where they're at. Try to find a way to have a conversation about what they're going through and how that relates to not necessarily their reality, because sometimes it's just a fantasy story. Sometimes it's just I want to have fun. I want to role play. I want to play a big stupid barbarian. So I'm going to hit stuff with a sword. That's going to be my whole character. And that's fine. Like if you're getting out of it what you want to get out of it, good job. You're on the right track.
Is it the master sword at least?
This guy? No, this sword is a reassembly sword, but he doesn't know that, so don't tell
him. What is a reassembly sword?
Every time you use it, it loses a part, and then suddenly, mysteriously, it gets rebuilt in the background.
Huh.
So it constantly it's a sword. It's like owning an old car, like you're driving down the road and suddenly your muffler just falls right out from under the car and slides down, or somebody steals your catalytic converter, because that happens a lot here.
That's a hot topic right now.
Big hot topic.
It happens a lot.
Yeah, it is.
So somebody steals your catalytic converter. You go in, you get a new one. But instead of going into the store and getting a new catalytic converter and adding it to your car, much like the Iron Giant, the bolt just kind of rolls closer to the sword until suddenly it screws itself back in, and then you're like, wait. I thought I lost that element of the sword. Nope, still there.
Huh.
But he cares about that sword because it's from his previous character, because his character died at one point, but he wanted to keep playing. He just didn't want to play that character anymore. So he said, Dungeon Master, please help me. I would like to kill my character. And I say, okay, great. How would you like to do that? And he says, well, I want him to go down heroically, and I want him to go down as a sacrifice to the team. Can you do that? And I said, yeah, well, you're being chased by an aquatic ogre, and it's not going to stop coming because it has regenerative abilities. So it's probably going to try and throw a hook shot at you and pull you overboard so it can actually eat you in the water as opposed to on the boat because you have all your friends on the boat. It's not easy to take care of that guy when we're on the boat. So instead of saying, no, we love this character. All your other players love this character. We're keeping him. Instead, I say, no. I'm not going to tell the players. We're going to find a way to make
And then that way all the other players are like, oh, fuck.
Oh no! Yeah, because when the ogre or whatever it is throws that hook shot and starts pulling you overboard, all the players have an opportunity to try to save you. And they're like, oh no, this isn't a planned encounter. This might actually go really terrible, and he might not have wanted that. But meanwhile, quietly in the background, the other player is like, this is exactly the send-off I wanted. And it's beautiful. So this sword for this new character is his old character's sword. And,
that's cool.
Yeah, I can't share this episode with him now because I've told you all that on mic. But he's because he doesn't know any of this. He was just like, I have a sword. I want it to be magical. I don't want to know what it does, and I want to figure it out in campaign. I say, okay, sounds like a plan. I'll make something.
What you do is you still share it with him, but then you timestamp it like, look, if you want to ruin your own experience.
Oh, yeah, I can do that.
Here's your spoiler fucking alert.
Don't read this part, and you'll be fine.
Yeah, don't listen to that
We're never going to talk
section.
about it again. We can't bring it up again, so
no.
That way he can
Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert.
That's the best way to handle it, yeah.
Yeah, William, watch out, brother. Watch out.
That's epic.
Man, that makes me want to get into... I'll tell you this, man.
What would your character be?
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited for this. Yeah, please tell me.
I don't even know where to begin, guys.
Well, here's the thing. I'm really good at starting off with characters.
So, okay.
If you were to build a character and something in a fantasy setting, let's say medieval.
Okay.
If you wanted to build a character, what does that character hate more than anything?
Man, that's a tough one.
Or an easier point, what does your character love more than anything? Can even be as simple as a cup of coffee.
You know, I think my character is really he's really gonna value the friendship and the people around him.
Relationships.
Yeah.
So
and trust.
So if trust is your I love, would the opposite of that be conflict? Are you like, is your character avoidant of combat or arguments?
Yeah, I think my character is definitely he's going to take a stand and be very passionate on his beliefs.
Yeah.
Which are not set in stone, of course, but are built on trust and friendship and good relationships, right? But also wanting to learn new information. So, you know, if my character is entering the game and I'm going to be kind of, you know, not saying someone's going to hold my hand along the way, but teach me the ways. He's taking notes.
He's scribbling like a business owner over
He's taking notes because I've never.
My notes are as indecipherable as a doctor.
You write so fast. I was like, is he writing something?
He is.
Like, is that a magic cursive?
I don't make mistakes. I only use a Sharpie and constantly just knocking stuff out as quick as I can because sometimes you hear a word and you're like, that's the operative word in that sentence. You might not know it as a player.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
sure.
Relationship is something that I said and then you mimicked. But it's trust is something that you brought to the table that I didn't have any hand in. And trust seems like a fundamental element for that character. So let me ask you two more questions, and then we'll kind of tie this concept of a guy together.
This is great.
I know, isn't this fun?
So fun.
This is building a character. This is something that happens usually between the narrator and the player,
Okay.
or the audience, and it's sort of prepping them to get in a minecart to then be on the rails into the campaign, so that all the minecarts start moving at the same time and space. So next two questions.
Okay.
Finish this sentence for me. As your character, I will never
Betray my team.
Great answer. I will always
Be there for my team.
Ooh, good. Yeah. So you would probably, based on the questions and answers that I'm getting, you'd probably be either a paladin, which is like a holy warrior bent on a particular oath and focus of intentionality, or a cleric who is a healer and come alongside and help out and rejuvenate health points after deep struggle with people. And so we'd probably have you in one of those areas. Maybe a druid, because they kind of have some salient.
What's a
element.
druid?
Druid is like a nature cleric.
Okay.
Yeah, they use plants and vines instead, and they all have some other fun abilities too. But mostly a druid is a nature cleric. But yeah, it's a that's the character that I would think about for you.
I totally see Kevin as a paladin.
Paladin,
That's
big
exciting.
heavy armor, holy weapon
Yeah.
from
send me
some
in.
god. I don't know if it's like a good deity or a bad deity, but it's a deity.
We got to figure it out.
And you have a mission, and you have a
Yeah.
mission and a purpose and a goal.
Yes.
And once you have those, you feel so entrenched with that character. Everything you say as a person feels in character, and you have great interactions with other players. That's
There
how
it
you
is.
start. That's how you start.
That's really cool, man. Because like you think like outsider looking in that Dungeons and Dragons is a game that there's specific characters that people have to choose to play from, and then you go through because people with board games and like things like that, like they have this expectation.
I want to be the car. I want to be the cheese grater. I
Yes.
want to be the shoe.
Exactly.
That's how it happens.
yeah,
And it's these pre-built things. Now that can be really easy for people that come to the table brand new, fresh.
but it's so cool that like you could create exactly what you want to be.
Building your character.
You could be exactly what you want to be, man.
really can.
I would be a
It's
wizard
outstanding.
of sorts. I feel like I would want.
I want to know your character.
I would
now.
want the
Yeah,
wizard.
let's talk about your
I would
character.
want the
Let-
wizard capability.
I want you to dissect Arthur's
Let's
character.
start with wizard.
That's where I feel like I would want to be. I'm getting
I
starting to get a little
want-
excited.
Let's put the heat on Art now.
Yeah.
Let's dive into this.
All right, so
So, Arthur, are you, as a wizard, where does your training come from? From the wilds and the cobbling together knowledge? Or is it from rigorous study and education? Which feels more natural for you?
can it be from the wilds, but
Yeah.
with some of the education?
Of course, yeah.
Yes.
That's the
so
beauty about
mainly the wilds, but you know, I learned from the little pieces of education I had, and then ran with that out in the field, and that's where I truly became.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say we'd probably place you at like a 5th or a 6th level wizard because you've had the training.
Okay.
But then you've also had field experience.
Okay,
which
so
is invaluable.
Is that a good?
Oh, it's great. It's
Okay.
beautiful.
What's your
Really
highest
cool.
level?
20.
Oh wow, yeah. So that's still strong to come out with.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Great, strong character. The way I usually say it for 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons, level 1 is for children. If you don't know anything about Dungeons and Dragons, start at level 1.
Okay.
Because it just gets you familiar with the concept. You can basically do nothing. You have no abilities except for your stats, which are your dex, strength, etc.
Okay.
Like dexterity, whatnot. And then at level 3 and beyond, that's for people who know what they're doing. So if you're like I started my players at level 1 because I had a couple of newbies and I wanted to slowly acclimate them into roleplay. Whereas my homebrews, which are like home-built content, not built from Wizards of the Coast, but rather just like worlds that I create out of my own brain. I'll start them at level 5 because I think I want people to be entrenched. I want them to have a good history. I want them to be proficient at their abilities. But you as a wizard, if you want to have training and then also some field combat, level 6 would be good because it means that you've had the schooling of the initial levels, but also the wisdom of knowing what it's really like out there.
Okay.
So let's talk about area of wizardry. I'm going to throw 3 elements at you: earth, wind, and fire. Which one appeals to you more?
Earth, wind, or fire?
Much like the band, we're just going to go right in for that.
I kind of want water in that mix.
Interesting.
You know,
Great.
I kind of want ice. You know, is that possible?
Yeah, of course it is. Yeah. So the player's handbook, which is the 5th edition
Okay.
Wizards of the Coast content that essentially is the most recent content, it has a whole pile of spells in the back, and many of them are ice related or water related. There's control water.
So I think it would be kind of fun to be like, you know, not to like play on a popular series, but to be like ice and fire.
Oh, duality in nature. Oh, fun. That's delightful. So, if you're doing if you're doing duality in nature, if you're doing a wizard that both has access to fire and ice simultaneously, I'd probably peg you as an evocation wizard because you can evoke things from reality. You can summon a fireball, or you can control water, or you can suddenly fire a spire of ice down a hallway.
But it's all in the dice, right?
It's all on the dice. Well, no. Here's the thing.
What happens?
There's a rule that I will expressed secretly here to you. It is something that it only comes to you after you've been doing a dungeon mastery for a couple of sessions. You start realizing the dice are less important than this rule, and the rule is called very formally
The rule of cool.
which is essentially like, if it looks cool, we're going to make it easier for you to do. Because all of us have a more fun time making something cool happen than we have fun confirming that you failed at something. Okay. So instead of, say your water wizard, your fire and ice wizard, say he's going into combat in a hallway against an enemy at the very far end. It's a herd of goblins, just a whole pile of them.
All right.
And if I say the encounter that the book has written says a swarm of rats attacks the first person in line at this moment, that makes it not fun at all because you don't have any health as a wizard. As a wizard, you are squishy. You're real squishy.
Yeah, I got loincloths on. I got my awesome robe.
Even as a field wizard.
There's no armor.
You can't wear armor to cast spells because you require all of these complicated hand gestures.
There's no armor on a wizard.
No. You're actually not allowed to wear armor as a wizard. But it's more fun to cast fireball down the tunnel and watch it streak as a small point of light past bricks and stone and mortar and grime and then suddenly explode into a massive burst.
I've seen this.
Yeah, you've seen this kind of thing.
No, but I'm seeing it again.
It's so cool to watch this thing happen. And if, say, I have you roll an attack spell or a dex check or something, as the dungeon master, as the narrator for the story, I might make it a little bit easier if you're really excited about it.
Okay, so check this out. So I fucking shoot the ice spike down the hallway, freezing the first goblin. All right? The first goblin's frozen. My left hand bursts out with a fireball, which explodes that first goblin, and then creating a smoke screen of mist between the ice and the fire. Yeah. And then that's when my paladin runs in. That's when they run in.
Yeah. That because ultimately, as a wizard, you're trying to set other people up for cool actions, especially the paladin, whose job is to be front line and center with a massive fucking hammer and knock this thing.
He's gonna break the ice goblins in half.
Yeah, okay, I'm ready. He's gonna shatter the 4th degree frost burn that they have all dealt with. Absolutely, that's the best part.
I think I'll have a blast playing D&D because I get into role-playing games. Come on, Skyrim I've played 3 different times. Yeah. Over 1,200 hours. Like, I like the role-playing stuff, but I've never done the D&D stuff. But it's just the possibilities, and you're talking about you get on Discord, you have these different software tools that help build these worlds and create this whole environment for people to express themselves. Like, what a healthy outlet.
Incredible outlet.
I feel like it's a healthy outlet.
Almost therapeutic in some aspects. Yeah. There's a lot of people that are moving in the direction of doing therapeutic role play in a Dungeons & Dragons setting. And it's something that I'd like to breach into. I'd like to write a paper on it.
Okay.
My Master's of Fine Art eventually, which is like a PhD for the art world because they don't really have that unless you're an art historian, is going to be based on the relational theory of art that's made when people are talking. When that conversation is happening. Much like what you do in Discussion Combustion is having these beautiful interactions where you get to know people and watch their growth and see what they're passionate about. What I'm excited about is seeing where a person starts and what that journey looks like as it progresses to a new point. Because roleplay, ultimately, as I've mentioned, I think recently, is about taking something, at least for me, is taking something from myself and saying, I want to examine this in a fantasy setting because I can't do it in a realistic setting. Perhaps I'm very imposing as a person and very intimidating. So I want to experience that as a role play and see how I can maybe navigate that more proficiently because I don't have any experience in real life because people keep running away. And that's a problem. And that makes me not be able to learn about that. Or say I'm really sad and I want to experience what it's like to deal with that sadness about a fantasy thing and not a real thing because the real thing is way too overwhelming. And
so how would that, because I'm curious how that would play out like in D&D, like somebody that's dealing with
great question. Thank you.
Sadness and
Or
despair.
deep, powerful depression. What you'll see is, there's Dan Harmon made a popular TV show called Community a while back where we had sort of the token element of Dungeons and Dragons being expressed because there was a certain very overweight character who came in and they called him Fat Neil. And he hated this nickname, so he wanted to overcome it. And so in order to do that, they helped him with some role play. And so they had him, he's so-and-so the fighter, and he has a great powerful sword, and he can do all these cool things that he can't do in his current form because he's not athletic, he's not fit, he's exhausted all the time. And so you see this transition happen where people start interacting with their trauma, their frustration, in a way that requires a little bit more vulnerability and allows them to start opening themselves up to powerful conversations, powerful elements, powerful moments of strength and weakness that can shape that person or reshape the way that they interact. Because ultimately, or the way they interact with that trauma. Because ultimately, what you run into with players is they want to escape their world. They want to, players for Dungeons & Dragons, they want to disassociate into a fantasy world, and there's a reason for that. Either it's because they just want to have a good time in a new setting with their friends, or it's because they're dealing with something really difficult, like being an imposing or intimidating person. And so in those interactions, it's really important to be patient with that person, recognize what they're trying to achieve, this route through their brain, this valley that they've walked over and over and over again because they've experienced it so many times. They're trying to walk through a different valley and change direction and change the relationship that they have to either their depression or their anger or their sadness or their grief. And roleplay situations give us the ability to do that in a context that isn't so real that it's incredibly overwhelming.
I've never looked at it that way, man, but there is so much power.
So much power.
Behind giving somebody just the power to create a character to, like, I've never even looked at it that way. Like, having this ability to create this character, like, because I play video games all the time to, like, zone out and de-stress. Yeah. Like, that helps me. But this is that on a much more intimate level because you get to, talk to your dungeon master and they get to kind of help talk to you through it. Like, being a dungeon master, there's a lot to that position.
Or now I think that's coined for Dungeons & Dragons kind of coins dungeon master. That. I like to use the term narrator because you're the storyteller. You're the facilitator. You're not part of the story, but you're facilitating the story. So, deep power.
So you kind of talked about how personally that you feel like there's therapeutic things to this, and then that's something that's interested you as like a career choice almost.
I would love to make money off of D&D, but I don't think I can.
Well, there has to be a way, right?
Yeah, there is. A lot of people are moving in the direction of asking players to submit tips to each session. So each player contributes $5 per session or whatever. That's kind of how the expectation will sometimes work. I run all my games free because I handpick my players very carefully. I really want people that I think can have a really powerful, engaged process with the role play. And so when I run games, they're free. But other people will run games for pay, and I've seen people charge quite a large amount of money per player for sessions, to the point where it's almost a sustainable income because they have that background for therapeutic role play. Now, I don't have that. I've gone through therapy. That doesn't make me a therapist. I have gone through role play. That doesn't make me the god of situation construction. And I've written stuff and I've run campaigns, but that doesn't make me confident enough, I think, to start charging people for games yet. But there are people that are doing it, and it definitely is a lucrative business. I would say if you're going to move into that position where you're asking people to donate money for the time that you're investing, because even though it may be hours and hours, like 40 hours prep work for like a 2-hour session, even with that, it's really important to make sure that you're honoring the people in that interaction, that you're paying attention to that person in front of you and what hurt they're carrying around with them and how that hurt is shaping the way that they want to interact with you. Yeah, that's concise enough, I think.
Man, I didn't ever think jumping into this, like the intricacies and different emotional levels of self-building, self-strength, self-discipline, and awareness. Like all this goes into this, man.
Oh yeah, of course. For tons of hours a week go into running D&D or prepping for D&D. Absolutely. It's an ungodly amount of time that I spend preparing for what will only be a 2 to 4 hour session.
Yeah.
Always. Yeah, but that's important because, like, as I've written down in my notes, I have each of my players listed, and I want to make sure that I engage each of them in that campaign. I don't want to leave anybody out.
Yeah.
Even if the encounter is all about combat, it's like we're going into the fight the big bad evil guy, and this big bad evil guy, we're gonna fight him, we're gonna beat him, and we're gonna win, we're gonna save the world. But then this one other guy in that interaction might not be really all that enthused with the concept of fighting this guy. And so instead, what I'll try to do is to engage them on other levels that aren't just necessarily, well, you hit for this much damage, or you made the person do this weird thing and that lowered their health, et cetera, et cetera. Instead, I'll try to focus on the roleplay elements for that character. So I have some pacifists in my group who just refuse to take part in combat. And it's important for me to remember that they're doing stuff with the time that's available to all other players. They're doing combat, but their story is just as important as the non-combat story. So I'm getting a little distracted. But essentially, what I try to focus on is trying to tap each player for a meaningful encounter with that character.
Yeah.
Regardless of what kind of encounter we're going into. I want to make space for them. I want to make time for them.
Yeah, I think that's wise. I mean, it's really interesting because it's whatever you want to do. Like there's I mean, I'm sure that there's stick within these kind of things to make sure that the game goes well.
Right, like it's a build your own burger, but ultimately it's a burger.
Yeah. But you can make whatever kind of burger you want.
You can have tomatoes, you can have a sword in there.
Everybody has their own favorite burger.
Yeah.
But man, what a fun time. I mean, hearing Kevin's character creation, talking about and you got so excited when we were putting our characters together.
I was in the zone.
You got
I was
stoked.
on the clock.
You got stoked
immediately.
So one thing that we like to ask everybody coming in here, if you could give humanity a piece of advice, so all of humanity could be better tomorrow, what's the piece of advice that you're giving humanity?
Listen better. I don't really have anything more than that. I think everybody's story is really complex, and everybody's story is very personal to them. But the most important part is to listen better. That doesn't mean trying to understand before they finish talking what they're talking about. That doesn't mean that you hear them so well you can read between the lines of the things they're saying. It just means be present, be patient, listen to people. Because ultimately the most exciting thing that I get into when I talked about you two about character arc, when I talk to you about the things that you're excited about in terms of if you were to play D&D, what would you do? You would talk about trust and companionship and faithfulness. You would talk about power and dexterity with that power and applying that power to complicated means, not just to freeze someone, but also to shatter them into a mist that obscures the entire field. These are beautiful elements about desires for each of you, things that you are passionate about. And I'm not going to pick up on that if I'm not listening well. Yeah.
Solid advice. And that's absolutely solid advice because we are in a time where it's easy to tune things out around us, right?
Yeah.
So
you can put the mute button on anybody. It's super easy.
Anybody, and it is.
That's easy,
and it's acceptable to just be like, yeah, I'm not feeling that right now, so I don't want to deal with that.
Right.
Right. And that's also life, right?
I understand. Yeah, that happens.
And that's a solid piece for humanity. Listen, slow down,
just be present.
Be present. It kind of ties back into something that we've all been conditioned with when you ask somebody, hey, how you doing? Good, how are you? Right? That just, it's an instinctual response that happens that maybe you don't really know what's going on with that individual. I'm good, how are you? Because if somebody says, I'm not good, what's the natural person's reaction? Well, I don't have time for that, I don't want to deal with it, right? I'm just trying to reciprocate what's the natural greeting. Good morning, how are you? And all that kind of stuff. So, listen. That's a great message for this week.
Yeah, I think because in that token, quick response for "How are you? I'm good. How are you?" is a common response that happens in day out routine. So you kind of will get to know those people over the course of asking that question multiple times, and you'll hear the, I'm okay, how are you? Or, I'm okay, how are you? It changes the way that you interact with that person. And if you're listening, you'll pick up on being able to get to know that person better. But if you're not listening, you might miss out on that. And that's okay, go live your life, do your thing, but you would get more out of that interaction if you listen to them.
Well, and I'll tell you, listening to you and some of the examples you gave, like, thinking that hearing the first half of the sentence, you understand where it's going, or, trying to read between the lines. I'm guilty of all that. Like, I'm so guilty of not listening.
Well, it's not a bad thing. You want to be prepared. And trying to anticipate where the conversation is incredibly important to you as a person that wants to feel like you're making the other person feel paid attention to. And it comes from a good place.
Yeah, but you can miss out on important details thinking about what you want to say next.
Yep.
And this podcast
Great point.
has showed me a lot of that, because earlier on, like, I would constantly interrupt people. Like, I would interrupt Kevin, I would interrupt our guest. I would want to interject and say something so bad that I was willing to interrupt other people. And in those moments, like, I was not being an active listener. And there's so much strength in listening. Like, if you're talking about listening, like, with actual, like, care and, like, your interest.
Presence.
Presence, you're interested. You build so much rapport with the person that's talking. Listeners are some of people's favorite people. Like, honestly, Kevin, I'll give you a compliment right now. Kevin is a great listener. Kevin listens to me bitch and complain about so many different things, and he just listens. And like, people like people who listen. And so, like, coming from my own perspective, I've struggled there. I feel like I've gotten better at being an active listener. But to anybody out there who you always have something to say, you feel like you have the right thing to say, you don't always have the right thing to say. And maybe you do, but it might not be the right thing to the person that's talking to you.
You're absolutely
so you have to take a moment to check yourself. And I'm saying this personally. I have to take a moment to check myself, shut up, let this person finish their sentence, and then actually digest the information, because
reflect on it.
We're all too quick to want to interject and like, oh, I know what you're saying. I want to finish what you're saying. Right. Like, and
I want to show you that I'm on the same page.
Yes.
Can I just say,
it's so interesting.
I'm really proud of you, because that takes so much patience with yourself to say, no, I'm going to quiet the voices within me to be present with this person. And not everybody can do that. So good job.
It was a struggle, man. And I still struggle to it. I still want to interrupt people while they talk. Like, I do that to this day. So I feel like that is such a great piece of advice, because it's too, like, a lot of
it's really simple.
The great pieces of advice that we give here are all cliches. But like we always say, it's a cliche for a reason.
Right.
Shut up and listen. If you can be an active, an attentive, meaningful listener, then you can impact somebody's day more than you even realize it, because you are giving them a platform to be heard. Like, you have ears that are being, used. And I don't know, man. I feel like that's a great piece of, I don't know if we've heard that one before.
That's
I'm really surprised you haven't heard that one before, because it's so cliche.
It's solid.
But you probably hear this particular phrase all the time.
Yeah, no, it's so solid. And it really does. It speaks volume. People need to be heard. And we kind of talked about some of the counterpoints with that, like, hey, I'm good, how are you, kind of thing. You're always going to have those gray areas where people might not show their cards, might not show their colors a little bit.
And sometimes corporate America requires people
Sure.
to not show their cards. When you're in food service, you're not allowed to show the fact that you're mentally unstable ever, because if you do, you're immediately taken off the line.
Yeah, there's an expectation there.
There's an expectation.
You have to live up. You have to play this role here a little bit. So you're right. And those things also play into that situation and add to the difficulty to be real here and in the near. Right?
How can I differentiate between when my professional life requires me to be a certain level of representative of the company versus when can I be a person, and when do I get room to do that? Yeah, it's
I feel like all the corporations should allow people to just be people. Like,
oh, they'll never do that.
They only care about that's money. The thing, though, is like the second that you take away a person's interaction to be human, Like it colludes so many different levels.
It ruins the job. Like when I was working,
it ruins the job. It probably ruins the customer experience. Like
a little bit.
Like I do logistics. I've done a lot of sales, but anytime that I've like broken the fucking script, and I'm like, look, man, this is just me being me. Like,
sorry, this script doesn't have a room for me.
That speaks more.
Yeah, it does. It really does.
Being genuine.
When I was working in fast food, temporary, about 3 years of work there, I used to sing to people when they came to the order box because it changed the interaction that they were having. It shifted their expectations. And so I would sing Lionel Ritchie, or I'd sing Guns N' Roses, or I'd do like an adaptation of those other songs and then bring it into the corporate whatever thing that I'm building. And it changed the way that people experienced the service because it made them feel like, oh my God, is that an artist? Is that a person over there? Is that this beautiful, like, thing
Somebody with
happening?
creativity.
What is happening in front of me? And it's beautiful. And people don't experience that on a day in, day out average. And so when you have room to be yourself, you do so much better at the job. You do so much better at the job. But I would love if more companies open that up, but
they're not gonna.
They're not gonna. Corporate America, corporations in general, are fueled on the almighty dollar, and they don't really care about anything except for, does that make money? Is that worth our time? Nope.
Did we grow this quarter?
Yeah.
Are we hitting higher numbers this quarter?
Are we hitting higher numbers than we hit last time?
And that's the thing, okay? And I know Kevin has something to say, but for all these companies
How can
to
you tell
expect growth every single quarter, like, at what point do we hit the cap? Because there's always a roof. I'm sorry, like, the world doesn't have unlimited resources, and like, that alone creates a cap.
We're seeing that happen slowly but surely.
Yeah, absolutely. And it ties back into what we talked about earlier with customer service, right?
Yeah.
Just the value that you receive with whatever experience it is, whether you're walking into your local mom and pop grocery store to buy a gallon of milk, whether you're talking to a corporate company about a customer service issue. We've seen a decline in both. And it's
because the human element's being removed slowly,
exactly
piece by piece.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, to echo off your point, I mean, listening to people really does go a long way, and not just listening like, oh yeah, I heard that person. No, actually digest what they're saying, because I think everybody's voice is equal, and everybody should have a place to say where they feel, what's working, what's not working, and then there is those barriers that we're up against every day. There's things that, that's not going to be productive for this corporate position that we're trying to move forward with.
Or that's not going to be productive for me emotionally because I'm just not there, or I'm the guy in the elevator that's just not prepared to have that meaningful interaction with you at that moment, and sometimes it's just not possible. But
you're right. There's always going to be those variables. But keeping that mindset, I think, is going to
listen better.
Yes. Yeah, so I would echo that for sure, because I think for me, I love listening to people. It definitely helps me have a more honest and humble opinion on what's going on, rather than just, this is what I'm going to do. I'm just going to drink Bud Light, drink whiskey, watch NASCAR on the weekends, fuck everything else. Right. No, I like hearing all that stuff. I think it impacts my life. It helps me adapt, overcome, learn, you know. And so I think that's a great believe and achieve, how to better help humanity this week.
Believe and achieve it. All right, I'm already breaking it down. So believe in listening to other people. Believe in silencing your own opinion to hear somebody's through, and achieve active listening. Believe in silencing your own opinion, achieve active listening. What can be accomplished this week if we just listen a little bit harder to the people that we care about? What can happen if we can believe silencing our own opinion, maybe changing it by actively listening? What a great piece of advice, Landon.
Oh, thanks so much. Appreciate you.
Solid.
I try to make these 30-plus years that I've lived worthwhile in some capacity to some other person, I hope. But, ultimately, it's all very personal. It's specific, and, maybe it doesn't help anybody, but it helped me a lot. Thank you.
Man, what an honor. What an honor. I met Landon when I was walking into the studio. This man had that great energy. He you have that voice that's just dying to be heard. And,
6 voices.
But and you have the 6 voices that are dying to be heard, and you also have the mentality to listen. Man, what a pleasure it was. You opened up my mind on D&D. So many people probably don't understand it. You know, what an educational conversation on that. Yeah, fantastic.
Well, give us some time. Maybe we'll run a one-shot sometime, and you'll see what being in the saddle of your fire and ice wizard is really like.
Dude, I want to.
And I think that's what we're gonna have to do now. So we've established our characters, right?
Maybe episode 2 we do that.
So yeah, we're obviously you're coming back, right?
I would love to.
We always have repeat
we're
guests.
getting them back.
So, but the way we got to do this now is, we're gonna have to have our feet held to the fire a little bit.
Paladin.
We're gonna have to get in there.
Can I be the druid? Can I be the druid in the situation?
What is a druid?
Druid is just a healing. It's just
Okay.
a nature cleric. They have some.
Okay.
They have some like nature-y stuff.
So you heal through the pollen.
Yeah. Or the mushrooms. Yeah. There's a character. There's a player. Let's take a small aside. This is a player character that I'm running right now. Her name is Dr. Ava Dorley, and she is a what's the bug scientist called? She's an entomologist. She's a ranger, but she has like swarm abilities, so she can summon a pile of moths that can lift her up into the sky.
Okay.
I'll play her. That sounds fun.
Okay.
Yeah. We got a paladin, a wizard, an evocation wizard. I don't know what your oath is as a paladin yet, but we can figure that out.
That's gonna come in due time.
Yeah.
The further we dig into this thing. But yeah, I think let's do it, man. I'm ready.
It'd be fun. We can move the laptop out of the fucking way.
We'll make it
And
work.
Get some dice. Well, you don't
yeah.
have to. You just get your room for your character sheet and room for my partition, so you guys don't see what my dice actually roll. Because sometimes you have to fudge rolls. It's really important to make sure if a player's experience requires a certain number to happen organically on the die, you can't engineer that unless you have the partition and say, "Oh, but I accidentally rolled a natural 1, and you automatically succeed." Because I set that up so that you could have this beautiful moment that could tie together all the elements of your character and bring you back to this beautiful moment.
You fucking mind wizard.
Yeah. Being a narrator is all about being a mind wizard. Yeah, absolutely. It's
fun.
It's so much fun.
That's terrific.
Man,
I'm
great
excited to dive
great
into this.
energy. Anybody who wants to get involved in the D&D world, anybody who wants to create worlds, Landon can help you with that. He can help
See
you with
me
that.
on Callum's Compass. I'm on Reddit, Twitter, I guess, and Discord. You can find me there. I've got a campaign running through Discord, so I'm welcome to audience members. If you guys want to hop in, you won't be able to chat, but you will be able to give somebody a gold piece at the end of the session for your favorite scene or favorite moment, because I like to encourage enthusiasm about great moments.
Hell yeah. We're going to leave all that in the comments, so that way you can easily click on all those things.
Yep.
Man,
absolutely.
What a fantastic conversation.
So good, man. It goes by so fast. I wish we had more time. All that will be in the show notes down below. Landon, what a fantastic evening.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. And let's have you back soon.
I would love that.
Within the next 6 to 12 months, somewhere in there.
We can do that. Let's do 12 months so that way I have some progress to support. Because honestly, when it comes down to it, there are great struggles when trying to run a D&D campaign, and beyond all other struggles, the greatest one is the almighty scheduling.
Yes.
There is nothing harder than scheduling. Let's find out. Let's figure it out.
Absolutely.
I love that.
Look forward to it.
Thank you.
Good stuff.
Good stuff, man. I feel great after this. I hope you guys feel great after listening to this awesome episode of Discussion Combustion. And we're going to be back to you next week with actually a friend of mine that I work with in my professional environment. Chris Norgrad's going to be up in here. And we're just super excited to keep this train rolling. Whatever your character is, whoever you want to be, you can be that person. Just set your mind to it. Listen to advice. And let's keep the ball rolling. Be good to yourselves.
You guys deserve it. We're not managers of this life. We're creators of it. So let's get out there. Let's own it. Let's believe and achieve. Let's #GoLikeHell. Landon, thanks so much for being here, man.
Thank you so much for having me.
We're going to see you soon.
Till life.
And like Art said, y'all be good to yourselves. You already know. You deserve it.